Cool. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. This webinar is with Nadine Cowan, who is the author of the Time Travelling Trio series, which I've always said wrong, so I'm really glad I actually managed to say that out loud and not trip over it. And we've also got Laura White here as our primary publisher, but I will let them introduce themselves to you. So Laura, if you could go ahead first, please.
Hello, I'm Laura White. I'm primary publisher at Collins. So I'm publisher for the Big Cat reading scheme and also publisher for all other areas of the primary curriculum.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. I'm Nadine Cowan. I am the author of the Big Cat Black History series, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk to you about the importance of inclusive Black history in the classroom.
Cool, thank you both. So first question is for you, Nadine, then. So could you just tell us a little bit how you chose to write the stories, and was there a reason that you chose fiction over non-fiction?
Okay, that's a good question. So I think it's important to mention a brief history of how I got into writing. So I've always loved writing since childhood. I'd write stories. During my teen years, I joined my school poetry slam team, and we went on to win the opportunity to tour Chicago and perform performance poetry. However, I later went on to pursue other passions, and I sort of like ended up putting the pen down. It wasn't until the birth of my first child that I realized that the publishing industry was quite stagnant, and it lacked diversity when I was trying to search for material to read to her. And I decided that, you know, I could be the change and do something about that. It coincided with COVID. So then I had the time to actually pick up the pen and then look into how I was going to go about doing that. And I ended up on the HarperCollins Author Academy, which is this really great initiative that was set up by an amazing woman called Rose Sandy. I was able to learn more about the publishing industry and then also hone my writing craft. It was from there that Collins actually got in touch with me and asked if I would be interested in working on this new Black History series that they had in mind. And I was absolutely ecstatic to be able to be given the opportunity to do that. So although I wasn't necessarily a historical writer, so I always say nonfiction kind of found me in this situation, I was more excited to be able to do it. And I looked at it as an opportunity to be able to look at Black history from a different angle. Because when I was a kid in school growing up, it was mainly centered around trauma and like slavery and the civil movement. And I thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to actually look at and really find positive stories, because I feel like at primary school, that's a very important age where we're really developing and growing and learning about ourselves. And I thought it's really important that people, like young Black children, don't just see themselves or people looking like themselves in chains or in servitude.
Amazing, thank you. So in terms of the sort of fiction versus non-fiction, obviously did you feel that when you were looking at those books for your daughter, did you think that there was sort of a lot more of non-fiction in that market than potentially fiction? Is that sort of partly why you wanted to get into it as well?
So in terms of what was out there, it was a lot of old stories that were read to me as a child, which were they're great stories, but I felt that so many years ago, what do we have now? So back then, I think for me, it was Handa's Surprise, Amazing Grace, and Eat Up Gemma that I remembered in my childhood. And then I was just really shocked to see that, okay, where's the stories like modern and from today? And for example, I love reading her like Oliver Jeffers' Stuck and How to Catch a Star. And I just thought, where were the fiction, just picture book stories for children where they are just riding dragons or falling into a hole at the back of the garden and end up in magical realms, and not necessarily, so the material that was out there was really focused on hair and body image, which is really important. But at the same time, I was just like, where are the fun stories that are just, children being children and the magic?
So I actually have some of the books here, which is very exciting. You can see them.
Yay!
I've got a lot more on the floor by me as well. There's 8 in the series at the moment, and there's 4 more coming out later on. So, and obviously each one of them, they sort of, well, like for example, we've got the Tudor trumpeter here, so it actually follows a specific person from history.
Yeah.
And so in terms of choosing those historical figures, because obviously each book, there's 12 adventures already there. How did you go about choosing those historical figures and which ones you wanted to write about?
So yeah, again, that tied into the fact that I wanted to make sure that they're positive stories and that they are not just focused around, enslavement and that part of history. For me, it was also important to make sure that it could fit all the way across the equivalent. So we're not just curriculum, sorry. So we're not just sticking to October and Black History Month. It's something that you can, fit into the whole year. So that was important. In finding the positive stories, it was also looking at maybe some figures that I've encountered before and thought, oh, these would be fun. How can I approach them in a fun way that is accessible to children? For example, I think one of the books you had, this one has just recently come out. This stemmed from when I was actually in studying fashion, and I came across these really amazing women called the Palanqueras in Colombia. And they were from this community in a maroon style village where they had actually escaped enslavement, and they set up their own community and they resisted. And at the time, I'd never heard of them. I've always heard of like Nanny Maroon from a Jamaican background, and just thought about Maroons being in like Jamaica or Haiti. So it was really fun to find out like we had these communities all around South America and the Caribbean. So I thought it'd be fun to look into that tale and look at how that settlement developed.
Yeah. And then in terms of, so that was one obviously that you'd already heard of. Were there any that you hadn't heard of at all? And how did you sort of go about researching those?
Yeah, there was lots that I hadn't heard of. So we've got quite a couple of Tudor figures in there, which one of my favorite stories as well. So yeah, there's one called the Tudor Trumpeter and the Deep Sea Diver. They're both really fun stories and can fit in. Yeah,
Those two here.
That's the one. So they can fit into like the Tudor curriculum, which is really fun. And another one, Yasuki, and that was really fun because that was Japan's first Black samurai, which I never even knew existed. And what I really liked about this one is it could appeal to lots of children and especially Black boys, because there is a lot of conversation about how can we get Black boys to develop a real love of reading. And I thought, oh, Japanese samurai, that fits in lovely.
Yeah, I think what you said about the Tudor stuff is really great because obviously we all know about Tudors. We were all sort of taught that in school, Henry VIII and everything, but those sort of more like background characters to his story, like you just don't know about them. So I think that's really nice that you said that it can sort of link into those existing curriculum points.
Exactly. We've even got a circus performer in there as well. I hadn't heard of her. Yeah, there's just like a lot of different characters. And in terms of research, I mentioned before that I came from a fashion background, not necessarily a history background, but in terms of research, they're actually quite similar. And I love research. So it was really fun to kind of like delve into these historical figures. For fashion, we do it for silhouettes to inform texture and fabrics and color. So it's quite similar. Visually to look into those stories and pull out lots of different information. Use the British newspaper archive. There's existing books, stories, and movies. So back to the King of Arcabuco story I was talking about. There is actually a film based in Brazil about a similar community of Maroons. So I kind of use that to sort of kind of creatively paint a world for me, how it might have been living in such a community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. We've also got a really nice comment in the chat from Elaine that said that she's loving the books, and they have 5 in their schools so far. So that's really nice. Elaine, if you do have any other, like, any sort of tips on how you've been using the books in the lessons, please do stick it in the chat or something like that, because I think that would be really nice for people to hear from somebody who's got those books.
Yeah, that would be amazing for me to hear as well.
Yeah, and for Nadine, that's true. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, so Laura, as sort of the Suzanne, sorry, we've got raised hand. If you've got any questions, do you want to put it into the Q&A and then we can answer them at the end? Thank you. So Laura, we've got you're the primary publisher of Collins Big Cat, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So Collins Big Cat has over 1,500 fiction and non-fiction readers for kids from reception up to Key Stage 2. So what made you look at no worries, Suzanne. So if you when you're looking at that list of books, what made you want to add those stories from Black history to it? What did you feel that was missing potentially from it?
Yeah, well, as you say, there are many titles within Big Cat already, and it's been publishing for nearly 20 years, and it spans all of the topics of the curriculum and so many different authors. And this was an opportunity to add some unknown stories and some brilliant, exciting stories, as Nadine was just describing. So just some really, really well-written, exciting fiction about, and that also shine a spotlight on figures in the past that children may not know about, and that teachers might not know about, and that parents might not know about. So there was the opportunity to do that. It also means that as classrooms are changing and children are changing, and the makeup of classrooms are changing, that we're making sure that we're also representing everybody in the classroom, and that everybody feels that they're represented, and that when children are encountering a book, they're seeing characters that look like themselves, or that show their experience as well, and their own history. So that was very, very important. There was also research done by CLPE, so the Centre of Literacy in Primary Education, that started in 2018 and is still ongoing, called the Reflecting Realities research. And each year they look across children's literature to see how representative it is. And in 2018, when they first released that research, they'd analysed the literature of 2017, and the figures were sort of depressingly low about representation of British, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. So for instance, just 1% of books had main characters from those backgrounds, and 4% of books had any characters from those backgrounds. So that was the first piece of research in looking at books from 2017. So last year in 2022, it's improved with 20% of books having characters from those backgrounds, but still only 9% with main characters from those backgrounds. So it was really, really important for us to commission books where we have main characters, the children in these books that are travelling back in time, as well as the figures in history. And even though the picture has improved over the past few years since this research has been taking place, fiction is the place that's lagging behind. So picture books and non-fiction have improved, but not fiction. And so even though these books are looking at figures in Black history, and so that's kind of educational and non-fiction, it's framed through a fiction story. And to speak to Nadine's point about why can't we have children just doing fun things like solving mysteries and time traveling, that's what these books do. So they're really great fiction books, but they're also mean that we are covering the figures in Black history at the same time. So they're also just really fun books for the children to enjoy. It was also a great opportunity for us to look to make our author base and our illustrator base more diverse. So we have lots of very, very high quality authors and illustrators across the list already, but to bring in some new people, so fantastic to have Nadine as a new author on Big Cat, and illustrator on Big Cat. And that's something that we're continuing to do now, is to look at getting different authors and a diverse range of authors to make sure that we have variety across the list, and to ensure that where we are covering figures in Black history or representing characters, Black characters, that we have authors and illustrators that are from the same background, so it has an authentic voice when we're doing that. So
yeah, definitely. So with actually we just mentioned it with Nadine's illustrations, so obviously having somebody who can write it and illustrate it, I'm sure that's obviously a lot of work for you, Nadine. Yeah, but obviously that means that you can then build up every aspect of that world, which is really nice, and it's like something completely from your own imagination. So could you tell us a little bit about the sort of techniques that you employ then, to make sure that that world, since it obviously is completely yours, it's both exciting but also authentic?
Well, a lot of the project I pulled from my own kind of background and childhood and growing up, and just looking also at my daughter as well, and like how she is. So from the beginning of the project, when it came to like even selecting what route we was going to go down for this story, I think I had a lot of different ideas, and I think I chose this one because one day I was just playing a board game with my daughter. I think over here we call it Ludo. You familiar with that? Ludo here? Yes, I was playing like a Disney princess version of Ludo with her, and then it just brought back memories to my childhood. And I just said, oh yeah, well, I used to play this because on my father's side, they're from Jamaica, and over there we call it Ludi, and it was a big thing in our household. We play a very long game, and it just made me think, okay, what if we had modern children playing the Ludi board, because my aunt had this big grand wooden Ludi board with African masks on it, and it really did look magical. And I thought, what if they were playing this board and they were transported back in time and learned about different historical figures in their different historical figures from the past. I also wanted them to be entrepreneurial, so their family background, it's based in a West Indian takeaway shop, which I thought ties in really nicely because it's very common for Afro-Caribbeans when they came over to the UK. We were very entrepreneurial. We had to come up with different ways of making money and making a living. So I thought that would be nice. And I feel like a lot of children could relate to this sort of dynamic. So yeah, they're based in there, and then also the restaurant's kind of like Blue Mahomes, which is a tree, and also relates into that visualization of history and really going back into our roots. So the children play this magical Ludi board game, and they're transported back in time, and they interact mostly with this figure in a way that I love the way that we've fused the old and the new. So they're actually learning a lesson from the past, and it sort of informs the way they're living today as well, which is quite nice, I think, because sometimes there could be that kind of disconnect. So in this way, we're kind of like fusing the two together. So how it sort of developed from there, I also looked at like my own family. We have diversity in there, so I wanted to convey like we come in different skin tones. So the main character, she's Black, African, Caribbean. Her parents are from the Caribbean. She's got her cousin who's also from the Caribbean, and it's kind of like how I grew up as well. We always had lots of cousins and family around. And then her best friend, Olivia, who's biracial, and she's English and part Ghanaian. So I just wanted to make sure that we've got different people in there. And I also wanted to have girls in there, boys in there. So it was very inclusive.
Yeah, definitely. Do you see...
I was just going to say, I also love the link between the present and the past. And I really, I think that's so important that the children are traveling into their past and finding out about their own history and other histories. And that importance of connecting with your own past and you connecting with your own experience through writing it. I think that's really lovely part of the books.
Definitely. And for example, we have one of the stories, Claudia's Carnival. A lot of people today, I think they just think Carnival's carnival. They don't really understand like the history of it. And it's like a really rich, beautiful history behind Carnival. And I thought it'd be a really nice story to kind of portray and show that it's not just a street party. There is a lot more to it. And I thought this would be a nice way to make it accessible to children.
We were actually speaking to some people from our sort of one of our network groups at work recently, and they were looking through these books basically to see if they knew any of the characters that were in them, and if they'd ever heard of them before. And actually somebody mentioned that like Notting Hill Carnival and Carnival itself in England and in the West sort of is that it's kind of about, it is kind of a civil rights movement in itself. Like that's what she mentioned, and she was like, and that's really nice that it's a way of showing that side of resistance without needing all of the sort of pain that comes along with it all the time.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
that's really important for this as well, to sort of show everything, that to show positive stories and the fun element of the children traveling back and all of that as well, and then showing positive stories from history as well, is a really important part of it. I also love the carnival one. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, obviously I knew about Notting Hill Carnival, but I didn't know any of the history about it at all. So yeah, I mean, I learned so much from these big cat books, to be fair. So I'm like, thinking more, to be honest. I wish I'd had them earlier. Amazing, thank you. So just quickly as well on the three main characters, because we've spoken about the historical characters quite a lot, but those three main characters that you've obviously completely dreamt up, are they sort of based anything like on your daughter or anything like that, or are they based on yourself? And also I wanted to talk just want to know about why there was three of them as well instead of just the one main character, because a lot of these kind of books often just have the one main character.
Yeah, so a lot of them are based on people I know. So like got elements of my daughter in there, my niece, cousins. Just wanted to portray, as I was saying before, like the broad spectrum of different people. I didn't want, originally I think it was just going to be one main character, but then going back to when I used to play the game, it would be with my cousins, and that was a big part of my childhood. So I thought, let's add a cousin in there, let's make it a boy, so that we're being inclusive and making sure that we've got boys in there as well. And then also the best friend, as I mentioned before, she's biracial, because I just thought it was important to showcase that we come in different colors, different shades, and we come from different backgrounds as well.
Yeah, I think that's so nice. I think it's such a good job of that. And yeah, so it's just nice to have those three characters there instead of just the one dealing with all of these mysteries by herself. So that's quite nice, because they all play different parts in each story.
Exactly. And I just feel like it was important to showcase like fostering teamwork and working as a team, because they're very caring and they care about each other a lot, and they each bring something different to the table in different situations, which I think is the fact in real life. And even working in classrooms, children, they're encouraged to work in teams, and they're all going to bring different elements to working environment.
Yeah, definitely. Cool, thank you. So Laura, could you talk a little bit about how these stories specifically, and stories like it actually, can be used across the curriculum in the classroom?
Sure, yeah. So the Big Cat reading books are, if people are familiar with them, they are used for independent reading in the classroom, so children can read them and enjoy them, for reading for pleasure. So these books are at different levels, and so the children, all different children, can read them and enjoy them in their independent reading. They might also read them as a group, so as a kind of reading group, a kind of guided reading session or a reading session in the classroom that you do. More and more schools that I've been talking to are trying to introduce more storytelling and reading aloud in the classroom, particularly since the recent DfE reading framework, which talks about reading aloud and also reading for pleasure, and how reading aloud and reading for pleasure are quite interlinked. So I think these books would be a perfect sort of classroom read. I think they'd be really lovely to share more widely as a group. I think someone in the chat just said that they introduced them at their assembly, and that was one of my points that I'd written down. I think they would be super stories to have in an assembly, to read an extract from the book perhaps, and then showcase the significant person from history. I think that would be a really nice way of doing it. There are some other ways as well, and history is an obvious one, but in the history programs of study for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, children should be looking at significant individuals and significant events. And that's across the world and locally and nationally. And so what I think that these books could be really useful in sort of injecting some new people into your significant people that you're looking at in history. I think kids would be really excited to learn about the samurai, and and I think that it would be fantastic. And so those stories could be used across history. There are also opportunities to link them more widely to, like, geography. The more recent title, Wangari's Trees, is sort of linked to ecology and geography, and if you're doing something about sustainability in the environment, that would be a super text to link to that. And also PSHE, like, I think that these books can be a really good springboard to talk about belonging, tolerance, difference, about the importance of connecting with the past, about the importance of different people's pasts and ancestry, about why these stories might have been hidden and the importance of them not being hidden anymore. All of those sorts of things, even at a young age, you can deal with sensitively, and they're really fruitful conversations to have with young children. And then I think finally I'd put writing, because I think as an inspiration for children to look at perhaps other figures in history that interest them, or of their own backgrounds, or something to imagine themselves time traveling and who they might meet. I think it could be a really super way to inspire children to then look at that and maybe even introduce it into their own writing. And I think that if reading something can inspire you to write yourself, then that's another very important part of the work that we do in commissioning a wide range of exciting authors and stories. So that, yeah, those are the points that I have of ways that they could go across the curriculum.
Amazing, thank you. Nadine, do you have any ideas in terms of like parental reading or anything like that you were talking about? Like how you would use your books or books like yours, would you use them in any way with your daughter, like differently to any other books?
Yeah, so just springboard, jumping off what you were saying about the importance of making sure that it fits in all around the year and not just Black History Month.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's fantastic about this is it fits in with like the Tudors. There's stories for the Victorians, like you said, saving our planet and the eco system. We've got one about music as well. So there's a musician from the 18th century France, I believe. So it also fits in with the French Revolution, the Tudors times, as we've mentioned. And I think even we've got something that can fit in with suffragettes and like women's rights. So what's nice about that is anytime she gets a sort of project that we can work on at home, I have stories that kind of fit in across the board. We had another project recently that I think she got sent home where she had to make some sort of sculpture or statue. So then together we worked on like our own kind of Ben in bronze, which we also have a story on that fits in with that.
Yeah.
And to add to it, certainly sending them home as home reads so that the children are taking them home, and that the parents can see that a diverse range of books are coming home to be read and enjoyed. It's really important too.
Definitely. I think it's important to think of creative ways of including these stories, and that it just doesn't come off across as Black history, but just history overall.
Yeah.
I'm just reading one of the comments here. So Jodie says, I've asked my daughter's school what they do for Black History Month, but was told that they do basically and they don't do anything necessary. It's only in that 1 month really. And so definitely needs to be thought sort of throughout the year. So she's saying as a parent, she finds it difficult to quantify how much is actually being brought into the classroom. And should the school be able to demonstrate that? I mean, that might be a question for you, Laura.
Should the school be able to demonstrate what they're doing?
Yeah, exactly. I think so parents can see that.
Yeah. I mean, some schools do on their websites. If you go in and look at their curriculum, they give you an overview of topics. And so the kind of curriculum design and the topics that are being covered. Within that, sometimes they will pull out the particular case studies or books or stories, but not all schools go into that level of detail around their curriculum design. But it could certainly be a question for the school to sort of just ask, what are the books that you're using? So that who are the people that you're studying in your history? What are the events that you're studying? And then you will get a picture across the whole year and across the whole of primary of what's being covered.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think it depends on the school, but you can kind of pop in and just kind of like make suggestions. If you've read something interesting, just say, this is really good and it could fit in here. How about that? And also, if you're willing to, I think my daughter's school is kind of open. If I had something interesting that I wanted to discuss with the children, I'm free to then go in and, you know, talk about something that fits in with something that they're learning.
Yeah.
Definitely. Amazing, thank you. So we've got one last question before we open up to Q&A. So as I mentioned, please do feel free to put something in the chat or in the Q&A box that's open to you, and we can chat about it after this last question. But yeah, so could we quickly just touch on sort of other things that teachers and schools can do to sort of ensure representation in their classroom resources and books across the whole curriculum? Laura, should we start with you?
Yeah, so my first thing is to look at the books in your classroom. So look at the shelves in your classroom, look at the book boxes in your classroom. What's the content? What's the representation in characters and protagonist and main characters and other characters, and also who's writing and illustrating those books as well. And is there any work that you can do to improve the diversity and representation across your classroom reading? And there are places that you can go to find out about children's books. So yeah, the Book Trust website is great and has a new great books guide that's just been released, books for topics. You can always look to Big Cat Books because we've got lots of different variety there and representation across different year groups. But yeah, I would say look at your bookshelves and just have a little audit and a little recce and see if it can be improved. And the second thing was, to Nadine's point about it being across the curriculum and all year round, look at all of your topics and are there opportunities to change the people that you're studying? Are there opportunities to look at events through a different lens? So looking at them from a different perspective in history. Are your geography, are the places that you're looking at in geography kind of stereotypical? Like, do you need to have a look at that? And also across all of other opportunities in arts and music to do more and bring cross-curricular opportunities from those diverse books. So to just sort of check across all of the subject areas and look for those opportunities and gaps that can be filled as opportunities to be more diverse across the piece, I think.
Thank you. Nadine, do you have anything to add?
Mainly to just echo what Laura said. She had some really good ideas there. So yeah, firstly, looking at your bookshelf and making sure that it's diverse. Jumping on what she said also about the authors themselves and the voices, making sure that they're authentic. Because I think when the report first came out about the lack of diversity on the pages, their immediate remedy was to not necessarily get, you know, more diverse authors, but just to make sure that they are illustrated brown, which wasn't the same, and you know they needed to dig further. So now thankfully there are a lot more diverse illustrators out there, a lot more diverse authors, so make sure they're on the bookshelf. Also looking at ways that you can creatively include Black history just across the curriculum year round. Yeah, also trying to get if possible, like parents involved. Like, are there parents out there who wouldn't mind coming and talking more about their culture or their history, where it fits in with your curriculum?
Yeah. And also just to say that to kind of emphasize the importance of this across all cohorts, regardless of the children that you've got. Like, even if you're in a classroom where it's sort of predominantly white, maybe, you know, like this is all about kind of children seeing themselves and others in the books that they read. So I think it's really, really important to sort of foster tolerance and acceptance. And I think that books and storytelling can be a really powerful way to do that for young children.
Yeah, I feel like these stories have a really lovely way of portraying such positive stories in a way that you can showcase them to primary school age children.
Yeah.
Doing the research, it was very challenging because historically, because of certain historical events, the history wasn't very well preserved, or the fact that culturally we tend to orally kind of pass down tales. It was very hard to, research these tales. So I think we've found some real gems here that would fit really lovely in the classrooms.
Yeah, definitely. We've had some really interesting comments. So we've got Joanne who said that she just wants to amplify the role of governors who can make a huge impact, lobbying for more diverse books, and Elaine has agreed there. So I think that's something definitely to take into account, that you can go to these people and you can ask for more stuff, and hope that, even if you think other people may have asked for these things in your libraries, there's no harm in asking again, because the more voices asking for it, the more likely something's going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
and budgets for books are tight as well. So the more people you've got lobbying on behalf of buying new books, the better.
Yeah.
Jumping on that, communicate with publishers as well, because obviously it's the publishing industry. Let them know that it's wanted and needed, and that we need these stories.
Yeah, definitely. Jodie has asked if we get a recording. Yes, we will. I think potentially. Yes, we do. So I will be sending this out to everybody once it's up on YouTube. So you'll be able to go on there and share with colleagues, hopefully, as well. Sarah mentioned the CLP report and how it's important to consider the representation occurs, where readers will see characters with agency who are identifiable, relatable, nuanced, varied, and central to the narrative. And I think that's a really important point, both with books but also with other media that children are consuming, because I think there was a classic sort of thing of, it's always sort of, there's a white main character and then all of the background characters are diverse, but that's not really enough, because that's not, as I mentioned, not nuanced characters. But I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add to what Sarah's just mentioned about that.
No, just in agreement. And I mean, and that's been seen from the research as it's moved on, that it's improved, but not in all areas. So there's still more work to be done on fiction and main characters. And
yeah, definitely. You're saying, looking at your books in your library, like, make sure that like you said, that there's those main characters there, as well as not just background characters that don't necessarily have a lot of sort of point into the story, and they don't really add a lot to the story. I think it's really important that they play an important part.
And I think that ties in with making sure that there are authors from a broad range of ethnicities. And I think why we've got into that problem is because when it is just white authors, they don't necessarily want to step on toes or write Black main characters. And so I just think it's important to have a range of different voices telling their stories.
Definitely. And children will be able to see not only themselves in the stories, but themselves in the creators as well. And they'll see that there's, it helps in terms of career talks, it helps in terms of all that sort of, all those different parts of the curriculum as well, maybe the PSHE side of things, like Laura was saying. So, so I think that is pretty much everything, unless anybody has any extra questions. We've just got some really nice comments, so I would definitely implore you guys to go and look in the chat at some point, because it's really lovely to see people getting behind these books and getting behind just positive Black history in general in the curriculum, I think. So I think if there's not any more questions, I think we'll end it there, unless you guys have anything else extra to say, or anything you'd like to point to, any resources or anything. No?
I think I can see that Mia's a lot of good resources in the chat already.
I think all the links are up.
They are perfect.
So,
that's great.
Take a look, and
that's great. Perfect. So that's everything from us today. As I mentioned, the recording will be put on YouTube, and we'll also send out an email to everybody that came today, and that also the people that signed up that couldn't make it at this time. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you to Laura, and thank you to Nadine especially. I think it was a really lovely chat.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's lovely to meet you all.
All right.